This course is on strategy, so let's maybe start out by defining strategy. As you can imagine, there are many different definitions out there what strategy is. And we could spend hours debating various definitions of strategy. So let me tell you my definition of strategy. And hopefully, as the course goes on, you will understand why I think this is a particularly helpful way to think about strategy. So to me, strategy is a distinctive array of interdependent choices that address certain questions. So already we have a number of key words here. So to me, a strategy is not just one or two choices, it's a whole array, it's a whole set of choices that a firm is making. Secondly, these choices better be distinctive or somewhat different from the choices that other firms are doing. And thirdly, it's wonderful if these choices are reinforcing, if they are interdependent, if they are complementary. Now, what are the questions that these choices need to address? Well, first of all, of course, what is the main objective that we're trying to achieve? Then, secondly, if we are part in strategy, we want to understand, of course, where do we want to compete? What is the scope of our strategy in terms of products, customers, and geographies? But that also implies that our strategy is very explicit of where we are not going to compete. And so a lot that we're going to see about strategy is about making choices. The second thing that strategy needs to address is the value proposition. Why do customers come to us and not to our competitors? And then thirdly, while of course it is nice to have happy customers, we want to make some money. So what is the source of our underlying competitive advantage? At a high level, is it that we are able to charge higher prices, or do we have lower costs? And at a lower level, really what are the activities that allows us to achieve this higher margin than our competitors? Now, courses like these sometimes have sort of the feeling what strategy is all about is, we think really hard, we come up with a wonderful strategy, then we implement it, and then we are done. Now, unfortunately, that is not how the world works, as you probably all know. If you think just about your own firm and the strategy that you have, how many times was sort of the intended strategy never realized, and how much of our current strategy was never part of a plan? And I think that is true for any organization, and that's very natural. But where I do think companies differ in their quality is whether they're able to close this loop, whether they're able to align everyone within our organization once in a while and make sure that we're all pulling in the same direction. Now, this particular process of where the realized strategy both comes from certain emergent ideas in the organization and part of a plan, a nice example of that process is Intel. Some of you may remember when Intel first started out, they were actually a memory chip producer. They were actually the world's largest memory chip producer with more than 80% of worldwide market share in memory chips. Now, unfortunately, at some point the Japanese caught up with them, and fortunate for Intel, they had this other business to fall back on, the microprocessor business. Now, intriguingly, when that shift was made from Intel's strategy of being a memory chip producer to being a microprocessor producer, actually the firm had already made that shift to this different strategy, even though top management didn't know about this. Now you ask yourself, how could that happen? Well, Intel had realized the key strategic asset that they had were these manufacturing fabs, these big manufacturing plants. There's billions of dollars of capital investments there. And so what they had done is they had given plant managers the authority to decide the product mix, but of course they also had given those plant managers profit and loss accountability. Now, these plant managers had long figured out, if we run microprocessors on our manufacturing line, we make much higher margins than if we run memory chips. So de facto, the firm had already shifted its strategy over to become a microprocessor company. Even though if you at that time would have asked top management what Intel's strategy was, they would have said, we want to be the world's best memory chip producer who also happened to have a microprocessor business. And so it was really to Andy Grove's great benefit and credit that he said, why can't I just walk out of that door and come back and say, we are now a microprocessor company? Now, actually, very few top managers have that ability, in some sense, to shed their own identity and to assume a new one. And so indeed, I think, had Intel not realigned everything around this new strategy, from the top to the bottom, on focusing on microprocessors, I don't think Intel would have been that successful. Now, this particular experience led Andy Grove to this wonderful little saying, "Let chaos reign, but then reign in chaos," repeatedly. It's fine to have thousands of flowers bloom for a while, but then once in a while we really have to realign everyone behind this one strategy. So our agenda for this sort of first module on internal fit is the following. What I really want us to focus on, after we talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals of strategy, is to hone in on one particular tool. And that is the tool of an activity system or a map of the system of interdependent choices that a firm has made. These activity systems, or these maps of these systems of interconnected choices of firms, will be helpful in two different ways. First, it will really help us to understand the sources and the sustainability of competitive advantage of firms. And secondly, it will be a very helpful tool for us to understand organizational change and how to think about that. So it will be very two different but really important applications of this one tool.